Phone says it's 7 o'clock, so we'll start the meeting. Before we get going with the minutes, just a quick announcement. Last time we had a public hearing and I was chairing the meeting, I completely forgot about the public hearing. We were half an hour late. I don't want that to happen tonight, so feel free to remind me. I also have set my alarm in my clock on my phone, so it will go off at 7:20. Open the public hearing. With that said, I'll open the motion regarding the minutes. Or I will, what's the word Terry uses?
Entertain.
I'll entertain a motion regarding the minutes.
Move that we accept the minutes subject to modification.
Second.
Page 1. Page 2.
Jeff, why don't I see the minutes in the directory, the download directory?
Yeah, actually, I'm looking too.
We're all scrambling to find them.
Here. And maybe I'm just not seeing them. I've stared at it for a
I
while.
cannot answer that.
Sounds like it's Rick's fault.
You're looking at the Dropbox or the...
Yes, the Dropbox.
Okay, well, let me check the website first to make sure it's on that.
You made them in hard copies too, because I'm not finding it.
I have a hard, I had a hard copy. I'm saying everybody did.
You're
So they
special.
are available online, but if you haven't had a chance to read them, then
We can postpone until next meeting.
that probably would make sense.
So.
But maybe there was some delay in,
I'll withdraw my
It
motion.
just- Every once in a while, it's pretty rare, but every once in a while, something like this happens, and so
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I'd withdraw my motion.
I'll second his withdrawal.
we'll table to next meeting. Okay, so the next section is public comment. Any comments from the public, whether regarding any agenda items or anything else you would like to talk with us about? Seeing none, I think it's okay to move on to board interviews and appointments. We're quite early for that, but Linda, are you ready? Sure. Great. Tell us what you got.
At a previous meeting, this board approved the establishment of the committee to develop a community forest plan for the proposed Catamount Forest. Since then, I have reached out in various ways to solicit people to serve on this committee and have gotten very good response. I think there's a lot of interest from residents and others to serve on the committee. That being said, I think there were 14, I don't know, there were like over a dozen applications, and the Conservation Commission does feel strongly that, and wants to advocate for having the Chittenden County Forester, Ethan Tapper, serve as a voting member of the committee. They just feel that it's important for him to have a role in, have a integral role in the establishment of the community forest. He is obligated by statute to assist in the planning for municipal forests. The Williston Conservation Commission feels that having him as a voting member will elevate his authority and add structure to the committee. I actually feel, while I support their advocacy for this, I also feel it's important that the Catamount Outdoor Family Center have representation on this committee, have voting membership. I just think that the success of this project will depend in large degree on developing a strong partnership with that organization to manage the property and continue the programming that they have. So that's my recommendation is, and if it's kind of comes down to either or, because there's so much interest among residents to allow greater resident participation, I would recommend that the Catamount Outdoor Family Center have voting membership, and that the Chittenden County Forester be an advisor to the committee, but that's my opinion.
I guess one thing to add is, keep in mind that this is an advisory group to begin with. They're not setting any policy specifically, but they will be making a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
And ultimately, it'll be the select board that has the final say on the policies that need to be set.
So will they make recommendations that the town residents will see and allow to comment on?
Yes.
So there'll be some period of time between the recommendations, or will it be like a public hearing, or is it just a publication of the document for the residents?
I don't know if that's been determined. I guess it's up to the board to decide what kind of public process you want to have. But in any case, the document will be public in advance of the select board meeting.
So Melinda, one question I have is a total of 14 people, names are in the hat. I know the original charge, the charge talks about 7 to 10.
Yeah,
It's, just from this, at least one of those 14, Kate Warner, did I pronounce her last name hopefully correctly, would be an advisory role. I guess to boil it down, my question is if we were to go slightly beyond the 10,
yeah.
would that be an issue?
I think that's totally up to the select board to decide. I think that,
It's not a hard and fast rule.
no, I don't think so.
It's dictated by the select board policy, so you have to change the policy first.
Would
As a
we-
practical matter, I mean, that's,
Oh, yeah.
Do we need a public hearing to change policy?
no.
All right. Well, probably then the best approach would be go through the interviews and then decide, whether we want to change the policy to allow more than 7 to 10. And also at that point, I assume we'll decide who's advisory versus who would be a member, if that does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And right now, there's 3 applicants that are not from the town. They're from either state agencies or the Trust for Public Lands. So there's Ethan Tapper, the Chittenden County Forester. There's Andrea Shortsleeve from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then there's Kate Warner from Trust for Public Land.
Okay. What's the best way to interview? Should we start alphabetically or?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, so that would be, is Mike here? Mike Klaus? Okay, Mike's on the Williston Rec Committee, and it was,
The members of existing town boards, we did not invite.
oh, okay.
Because the board has already interviewed them and appointed them, and their own board has said amongst themselves who wants to be the representative from our board.
Okay.
So that's how the list came.
So
So I mean, we can still have the board, if they want, interview each of these, but I thought in the interest of time,
Okay.
you might want to focus on those that are not currently members of town boards.
So that would be both Mike and Ben King would, okay, and I do notice that Ben
And
is,
there's another, Anthony Jordick from the Conservation Commission, of course, Mike Klaus, and Ben King. And then the last one is Rita Dessau, and I'm not sure I got her name correctly, but she's the town's representative to the Catamount, the Winooski Valley Park District.
right, okay.
So Ben King's on the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Yep. Okay,
I assume that's a resident, right?
Yes.
The
Yeah.
rec committee, and those are all residents?
Yes.
Okay.
sounds like, is James Diaz here? Hey, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah,
The way it works is it's an opportunity for you to, explain, why you put your name in the hat. Just give us a brief introduction. We have your application form, and then we might follow up with some questions.
Sure. Okay. Well, very nice to meet you all. Haven't had a chance to meet. I've only been to one select board meeting before, but hopefully I get to meet you all in person individually someday in the future. Again, my name is Jay Diaz. I go by Jay. I'm a Williston resident, first and foremost. I live on North Williston Road in the Hollow, and I'm very excited about the prospect of a town forest being even closer than some of our other town forests, which I visit regularly. I've enjoyed going to Five Tree Hill and Mud Pond and Oak Hill, so I really was mostly looking for a way to get involved with the town. This is my first foray into any of the kind of study committee or commissions that have come up, and this was one that seemed to be very interesting to me. I'm also a conservationist, environmentalist myself. I'm on the board of Conservation Law Foundation, and as well as on the Voices for Vermont's Children board, which those organizations focus on improving access to outdoor areas and ensuring clean water and clean air, as well as ensuring that low-income kids have access to all the resources available to our towns and cities across Vermont. I'm a lawyer, and so I'm a practicing lawyer and do mostly litigation work, but also have been involved in the policy world. I was previously, this past legislative session, the policy director, acting policy director for the ACLU of Vermont, and moving back into my litigation role going forward. But so I'm well versed in studies and committee work, and have been on probably a countless number of committees at the state and local level, usually involving much different types of matters than this one, but mostly I'm just excited to get involved with my local town. It's something I care about, being, democratically, small d, democratically involved. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just wondering, do you have any vision ahead of time on what you think Catamount should be for the town?
Well, I've read through the plan, the draft plan, and I'm excited about the vision that's there, which is, basically, keep most things the same, but open it up and make it a free, open park to the general public, while having some programming that will be run by the nonprofit. I think that there are certainly options and possibilities for expanding what is possible at Catamount, but I think we got to look into that a little bit more before really making those kinds of recommendations, and that's what I'm glad to see that there's going to be this 12-month process of actually allowing the community members and the people who care about this town to take a close look at this and see what are the best uses. But so far I'm excited by what I see.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if I move down alphabetically, I've got Jeff Dickinson. Is Jeff here? Okay.
So he's, do we want to say anything about him, just so we kind of get a...
The one thing I know about him is he is an abutting landowner.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. Barbara, come on up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Barb Evans. I am a licensed structural engineer.
Okay.
I'm a partner at Knight Consulting Engineers, where I've worked since 1997, so that's right here in Williston. I'm also a Williston resident. I live off of Governor Chittenden Road. I am both a civil and a structural engineer, and I have a lot of experience with project planning and implementation. So I'm hoping that my skills could benefit the committee in a certain way, and I've always had a very strong interest in this beautiful Catamount property. My family has a long history with forest management. In fact, my father was a professor at UVM where he taught forestry. So I'm sorry, that's about all I have. Let's start into the questions.
There's no time you have to fill or anything like that. Questions?
Any vision that you have?
I'm completely open, and I just want to be part of this project and the study committee.
That's what is your engineering background and professional background? What would you bring to the board from that?
Well, I have, a good handle for planning, budgeting, moving things along. As you know, as an engineer, we're under tremendous stress at times to get things done in a timely fashion. So I'm a doer. I like to get things done. And I have a very strong technical background, which I think might come into play, especially if there's going to be any facilities.
If I could just follow up briefly on Terry's question, you're trying to come into this with as open of a mind as possible. Is there anything you don't want to see there?
I just want things to be done in a fiscally responsible manner. And I think we should, focus on the main immediate priorities, and maybe not so much speculation on future type of facilities. And I just want to see the project happen and not get waylaid with a lot of extras.
Good, thank you.
I have one more question. Are you in a budding landowner? You said you're on Governor Chittenden.
I'm on Giovanna Lane. So there's a little bit of preserved land between me and the Catamount.
Okay. Great.
Thank you, Barbara. Next comes Ben, but Ben, I know isn't here. Is Court here?
So, Court that emailed me and said that he had a conflict, he wasn't able to get out of it. He was gonna try and get here, but
Okay. And a key thing about Court is he is on the Catamount Outdoor Family Center Board, and you're highly recommending that, I shouldn't say highly, I'm sorry, you're recommending that he be appointed. Okay. Patrice?
My name is Patrice Maloney, and I am a budding landowner. And I am interested in serving on the committee to bring a local perspective, having been next door neighbor to the Catamount for 40 years. And I'm excited about having the property conserved and continued in recreational use. I'm interested in seeing other uses explored, although I think that a lot of changes that are possible should be taken slowly. One of the concerns I have about it is traffic, because of the classification of the road between the farm and the Catamount has always had issues with, we have a lot of recreational use on the road as well. So I'm hoping that we can cover some of that ground. And at the public hearing on this, the traffic issues were brought up and said that they wanted to deal with that separately. And I'm hoping that the select board will chime in on whether that's a good idea or not, because I think it's all part and parcel to this. And I'm hoping that we can have somebody a go-to person, either at Public Works, that we can call on for information and advice as to possible, ways to improve the situation. Events are the biggest problem, because we have a lot of large, heavy traffic and buses, and it creates a big hazard. But beyond that, I think that there is room for, I'd like to see it opened up to other uses, like it is in other towns, such as Jericho and Heinsberg. They have a portion of their town trails dedicated to horse users, horseback riders. And I do have a community of equine friends in town and close by that are interested in how this happens. And so I can help provide a lot of input in that regard. I have a lot of questions, although I'm not quite sure who to direct them to. And so I was wondering if, once this committee is formed, does it report periodically to you, or is there someone else who is going to be handling updates and answering questions that the committee may have?
It's a good question.
You'll be assigned a staff person. Melinda will be the primary staff person for the committee. And there will be other staff people involved. You mentioned Public Works. Well, they will be involved on an as-needed basis for using their expertise. And whatever expertise that the committee needs that the town can provide directly, we will provide it. If we need outside help, then that's a different matter. We'll have to have a discussion on that.
Basically on-call whenever we need to contact you.
Right. And as far as I said at the start, the committee's report will go to the select board, and if there's a need for interim reports, then those would also go to the select board.
But that hasn't been determined yet, if there'll be like interim report.
Right. I think it would be on an as-needed basis.
I had a zillion thoughts on the matter, but that's all I can think of right now, so happy to answer questions.
So questions for Patrice?
I think she did a good job in explaining her thoughts, and you run a farm now, right? You run.
Yeah, I've been operating, we run an organic dairy, and I've been stabling horses for 20 years. And it's a generational farm. Goes all the way back to the original Chittenden estate. And it's very, we have deep roots in the area, so I definitely want to see whatever happens around there to help, preserve the whole heritage of the place. And since the Catamount is also a historic site, it kind of provides a nice nice way of keeping everything, the integrity of the area historically as well as, conservation-wise.
Great, thanks.
And the only thing I'll add is you're also an abutting landowner.
Yeah, I think I said that.
Oh, okay, I might have, sorry.
Sure.
It was in our application.
Yeah.
I think it was the first thing.
Pardon me?
It was the first thing. I am an abutting landowner.
That's logical.
Okay, great, thank you. Is Teresa here? Terry, okay, thank you. It did say Teresa on the.
Oh, it did? Oh,
Yes.
well, must have come through. I usually don't use that. But, so I'm Terry Marin, and I live in Williston at the end of Christmas Lane over near Lake Iroquois. And So I just think this is a great opportunity for the town of Williston. These opportunities don't come up too often, and to have a place for people to recreate, great for wildlife, corridors for deer and all sorts of other bobcat and things. That's okay, no problem. So it's just, I'd just love to see it continue as it is with the program for the biking and cross-country skiing when there's snow, and have people to be able to access it for exercise, for their dogs and just for themselves. And I'm an avid birder, and I do bird walks with folks, and I know they've done some bird walks there before, kind of monitoring what birds are there, wild flowers and things like that. But just like to be a part of seeing it develop into a town forest, and I actually go over to the Heinsberg Town Forest quite a bit and see all the uses that they have there with hunting and mountain biking and snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. So a lot of different uses there. And I know they had some timber harvesting there, and they laid down the floor in the town hall with harvested timber from the town forest. So
That's cool.
yeah. And we actually own a little bit of land, or some land, in Richmond, and we went to the meeting that they had, and they invited the forester, Heinsberg a town official, and someone from Mad River area, talk about their town forest and all the advantages that they have.
So you have a degree in animal science. How do you think that applies to,
Well, that was dairy cows.
okay.
I don't foresee them doing any kind of farming there, but yeah, so animals in general, though, I'm pretty active in, keeping track, group, and do a lot of research and reading on bobcats and things.
Which are close by.
Yes, yeah, not very far away, so right in town.
And I just, the word isn't follow-up, but I guess I liked what you said about the Heinsberg Town Forest and the concept that you could have these different uses. Some of them might at times have conflict with each other, and which I think is one of the things this group will need to deal with. So I guess my question is along that lines is, when there is conflict between uses, is there a way in which that conflict can be, I don't know what the right word is, mitigated? Managed, dealt with?
Our land is not posted. We have almost 300 acres, and we allow people to hunt there, and you know when hunting season is. I think the Heinsberg Town Forest, they have a note. They just say this is hunting season, and make sure that you're aware and you're wearing safety, clothing, and just be aware that this is a multi-use area. But in general, for 2 weeks out of the whole year that I can't, that I don't go out as much hiking, I don't have a problem with that. So.
Okay, good, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Terry. Next is Ben. Is Ben here? Hey, Ben.
So, my name is Ben Norris, and I live on Governor Chittenden Road, and so I'm one of the abutting landowners, and probably my interest in this committee has to do with actually why I moved to Williston. I moved to Williston because I drove out on Governor Chittenden Road with my wife and my family, and I was like, this is where I want to raise my kids. Like, they had such a, we went to one of the biking events, and they had such a good atmosphere and such good, I don't know, what we call it mojo. Like, it's like you go there and it seems like there's typically sunny, I don't know. But it's just a great atmosphere to be at with your family, and I spend a lot of time there. I'm an avid biker, and if my kids want to run, I'll run with them. But so when I found out that this is the way that Catamount was going to end up, that it was going to be conserved and that we're going to continue on with a lot of what they're doing, I was pretty excited. And then I was really excited to come up with a way that I could participate in that, because I do really value it, and I think that even through this process, it could become like a potentially even more valuable resource for more of the residents that for some of the things that I think they're like opening it up for hiking and running, and I think that will make more people just want to go there, and I think that's a great thing, and I'm excited to be able to participate in that.
No, I think you did a good job.
Okay. And you did mention you are a budding landowner?
Yeah, I live on Governor Chittenden Road.
Okay, good. Great, thank you, Ben. Steve?
Steve Page, budding landowner, lived here for about 30 years. And I think my primary interest is that the value of a conserved catamount family forest is far greater than any of the other options that might occur. We have a good friend who has worked with the town forests in Heinsberg, and we've had some conversations. I hope to have some more, but I'm under no illusions that it's a challenge to balance the interests of different stakeholders, and there are, and so there will be some give and take and some compromises, I think, to achieve the solution. I think I think I've submitted the other information, the biographical information, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You said on your, I'm sorry, on your application, municipal planning, City of South Burlington, what does that mean? What does that describe?
Assistant planner and then city planner.
When was that?
73 to 80, 79.
Glory years.
Anybody else, questions? Two things about Steve is, first, I consider Steve a friend, so I just want that out there, and hopefully he considers me a friend. But in terms of this discussion, maybe more important is Steve is a landowner as part of this, and I think that's actually a very important aspect of Steve's consideration to be on the committee. And thank you, Steve. Yeah.
I think one thing I could add to that is that in looking at the fiscal impact in terms of our situation is that it's probably a wash, that we will have to exit the current use program that we're presently in. And so our tax rate will go up. I think that's the primary concern. And our property value will go up somewhat because of this donation proposal, but on balance, I think that it's probably a wash, and it really is less important to me than the major objective of achieving a conservation agreement and understanding.
I wasn't even thinking along those terms. I was just thinking as somebody who's contributed a significant part of your land to this. I have a hard time just thinking that you shouldn't be part of having a say in, how it moves forward. Thank you. Yeah. Plus, I think you do a great job, but we'll get to that part later. Okay, I think that's it.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
Thank you. Even said that. So I need to recess this discussion so we can hold a already scheduled public hearing. Let me get my notes. So the first thing I have to do to open the public hearing is read this this language. So here we go. Pursuant to 24 VSA Section 1971, the Williston Selectboard will hold a public hearing at the Town Hall Meeting Room on Tuesday, June the 20th, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive public comments on the proposed new Housing Trust Fund ordinance. The purpose of the ordinance is to establish a housing trust fund for the promotion, retention, and creation of long-term affordable housing for very low or low-income households. If adopted, the amendments may become effective 60 days after the public hearing and a vote by the Select Board. So with the public hearing opened, Rick, is there town staff that will
No, they
present?
I hadn't really planned on it. I think the bottom line is this is just a mechanism for establishing a fund. It does not commit any money at this point in time. That would have to be a separate issue and vote by the Select Board. It's an outgrowth of and recommendation that was advanced to the Select Board by a task force that was appointed by the Select Board. And we do have representatives from that task force in the audience this evening.
Okay. So if I could just follow up a little bit with what you just said, this operates a little bit like how the federal government operates. First, they authorize the ability to expend money, and then they decide whether they're actually going to put money into the fund that they previously authorized. Okay.
And it would provide a mechanism in case we do get grants, right?
Right.
So
Grants or donations
be
or.
a place for that money to go.
Yeah. And then before we get to the members, we did receive one public comment by email, which I think questioned whether it was needed and whether we should be, the impact on our taxes, I guess, is the most fair way to put that succinctly.
How does that comment get entered into?
It just was. I mean, we can make it more formal by, I suppose, if the board wants.
Yeah, seems like it makes sense, right?
I mean,
Because she had quite a
Right.
elaborate memo,
Yeah,
so
it
we
was
should
a
add it into the
lengthy,
record.
Yeah.
It was Ann,
Yeah, I can't remember.
yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Her email in its
Yeah.
entirety should be part of the public record.
Right.
She took it
Yeah,
down.
it won't show up in the minutes other than the fact it'll cite her name.
Okay, good.
that she
Okay.
provides comments by email.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I'm looking at several of the members of the task force, and would love to hear from you. Charlie McGill.
Hi, I'm Charlie McGill. I'm a newcomer to town. I've only been here 41 years. I do volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, and I've done that since about 1987. So I've been involved one way or another for quite a long time. I just was looking at statistics. There are 10 Habitat for Humanity houses in Milton. There are 8 Habitat for Humanity houses in Charlotte. There are 4 Habitat for Humanity houses in Shelburne. There are 2 in Huntington Center, 2 in Moncton, and there's 1 in Williston. Now, one of the things about Williston is that it's the only place that a private citizen has given land to Habitat for Humanity to build a house. But if I look at the balance of low-cost housing, I remember having been challenged by Peter Clavel to say, why do you keep coming to Burlington to build houses? Why don't you build houses where you live? And I see this as a mechanism to help be able to do not only Habitat for Humanity houses, but all kinds of housing, assistance for building housing for people whose income is below 80% of the median income for the area. And I think that when you look at our industrial, our daytime population compared to our nighttime population, I think you can see that there's a real need for providing that kind of housing in the town. And this gives them a mechanism to give some assistance to that.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Hey, Ken. Ken Sassarossi.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ken Sassarossi. I live at 89 Hickory Hill Road, and I've been in Williston over 30 years. My daytime job is working for Housing Vermont, which is an affordable housing developer and equity raiser. So it sort of intermixes my daytime job with the volunteer work. I was both on the task force that looked at the need for an ordinance, and then on a subsequent task force that was looking at what were the critical elements of a task force. And I must say that during that time span, I was impressed by the need for affordable housing in Williston. A recent survey published on the VHFA website said about a third of the renters in Williston pay more than 50% of their rent for income. 50% of their income for rent, which is a severe burden. We're also hearing more about the links between a vibrant economy and places where everyone can afford to live and be a part of the community. And certainly Governor Scott's initiative to create a housing bond in the legislature this year was a recognition that need cuts across a wide range of incomes. And what we're trying to do here is create a potential vehicle, and again, to repeat, we haven't landed on a funding source, but a potential vehicle that would allow the town to take advantage of opportunities to stimulate affordable housing so folks of all income levels can live and work in town. And I think the ordinance allows us to do that, sets up a nice framework. It's not overly bureaucratic. It allows for oversight, and it allows for a discussion in the coming months about how you might raise funds for that. I don't like to link with the federal government model because I think no one likes to link their work to the way the federal government works. I think this is a rational plan that first says, let's think about what we want to do, talk about that, and then once we've decided this is something we're going to do, talk about how we might raise money for it. So happy to answer questions, but thank you for listening and for the opportunity to participate in the task force.
So any questions or comments from the select board?
Any other people in the audience?
Any other people in the audience? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify a couple things. So I guess at this meeting, it's just whether we start this. It's not how it's going to be funded. Because I know in the paper, it talked about the 1% sales tax.
Right.
Am I wrong, or did I read that? Or?
You are correct.
Okay, so at this meeting, you're not talking about increasing our sales tax 1% to fund this. You're just talking about creating this.
Correct.
Creating a repository, basically, where we can put funds, whether they be grants or donations, bequests or bequeaths.
Okay, so it's not that there was going to be an automatic 1% sales tax. Okay, yeah. And that's just kind of the feel that I got from that article, so that's good. Yeah. I fully support this. I'm disappointed in that there is already a mechanism for our developers when they come into the community to create, offer affordable housing. And I think Snyder over Finney might have a small percentage, and I think Cottonwood does not plan on participating at all from the meetings that I attended. And basically it was just a way for them to speed up their processing of their development. If they offered to do some affordable housing, it could move faster. So they have not taken it, they're not participating in this at all, and that's disappointing. But I think it's great to try to find some more affordable housing. I know there's a formula to figure out what is affordable housing, and I'm just surprised. I guess I'm naive. I remember going to a meeting where a fella from the housing, the apartments across from Shaw's, which are affordable housing, and when he said what he paid for rent, I was astonished, because I was thinking affordable housing for an apartment might be $400 or $500. And when he told me he pays, I don't know, $1,300 or, I mean, it was to me, I don't know, am I naive? I just don't think $1,100 or $1,300, I just don't see that as affordable housing. But anyways, I support this. I don't know if I would support a 1% sales tax, but that's not even on the platform right now, but I think it's a start, and it would be nice to see some of our developers more participating in offering more opportunities, and that's what I would really love to see.
Thank you.
Just quickly, I only just looked this up on the website, but I just wanted to relate to the committee in case, to the select board in case you hadn't heard. There was a recent study came out, I forget from which group, that ranked Vermont one of the worst states in terms of housing affordability, in terms of like how you could pay for a 2-bedroom apartment in Vermont, especially in Chittenden County. It's very expensive. So I think a person working minimum wage would have to work like 110 hours a week or something to afford that as a 30% of their income. So it's just something to add to the grist for the mill.
Great, thank you. Jim, and then Patrice. Sorry, Jim got his hand up first.
I came here specifically for this agenda item. Various task force concerned citizens in Williston have been working on this for at least 15 years or more. And I remember attending one of the earlier meetings, and the statement was made then, if it wasn't given to you, if you don't already own it, you can't afford it. And it's gotten worse. 30, 40, 50% of your income to have a roof over your head. And we're all acutely aware of our Exit 12 hero. That's another whole avenue of despair that we tend to have kind of a blind eye for as a total society, I believe. I came to totally support this commission's report, and I, as your legislator, do understand that it's baby steps to the office, Bob, baby steps to the office, Bob, but we need to commit as residents of this town to a line item to help support this. Let's start with gifts and donations. I totally approve of that idea. But I think we need to come to grips with the idea that people are food insecure in this town. Lots of them. Children go to Williston Central School, and that may be the only meal they get during the day on a regular basis. And what about homelessness? There are homeless children in our school system. That's a different topic, I understand, than affordable housing. But the affordable housing is something that we can and are discussing here tonight that needs our real urgent attention as well. And the good work of this commission has brought it to you folks at the select board level. Also know, and it was mentioned that the legislature this year, in response to Governor Scott's wish, has endowed, if you will, affordable housing in the state of Vermont with what will come out to be, after leveraging, depending on what happens in DC, maybe $100 million. And many of us in legislature did that because of this incredible need for affordable housing. But we did it with a tear on our cheek because it was another attack, if you will, on Act 250. So we made Act 250 concessions, understanding that they were concessions, making it easier to develop in downtown centers, village district centers, and growth centers. And that makes it easier for developers. And so we can help leverage here in this town those dollars that will be generated through the state bonding effort. And by the way, we committed a bunch of water quality money. You know, that didn't make this guy awfully happy either. But on the other hand, this is an urgent need as well. So a lot of concessions have been made statewide in this field. And our town of Williston can recognize the need first and then act. And I totally support that. Thank you.
I just was curious about a couple of things, and they were sort of touched on in both instances. One was what I think she was referring to as the housing allocation matrix, where affordable housing was given points for subdivision applications. And that's been in place for over 10 years now, I believe, and I just wondered how much of an impact that has made. What has it even made it then? Or is this, you know, is it even a factor, and that's why we still have this dire need? And the other part was this $35 million that was committed by Governor Scott and leveraged. Maybe you can answer the rest of this, Jim, is where's that money going? Do we, as a town, get a portion of that to help with this fund?
No, those funds are going to go to help develop affordable housing. They're going to go actually.
Where? That's what we're trying to do here, isn't it?
Maybe I can throw some of that for you, Jim. Assuming the budget passes in the next day or two, the $35 million would support a broad range of housing activities, from home ownership to rental housing, from creating new housing to fixing older housing, because different areas of Vermont have different housing needs. The $35 million will flow through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which will make the awards, and they'll make awards to the organizations and entities that can normally apply to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And there'll be perpetual affordability will be attached to the projects that use those funds. So the funds will be awarded not to municipalities, but on a project-by-project basis. So it's not, you could have a project in Williston that could get funding, but Williston itself would not be the applicant. And again, it can be used for home ownership and rental housing. And as I said, it's intended to do everything from provide assistance for homeless folks, as well as providing, increasing the supply of housing for people that earn between 80 and 120% of the median income in Vermont, which is generally outside the range of more typical housing affordability programs.
And Ken, I don't mean to look to you, but can you provide some perspective on Patrice's question about how have our incentives worked so far?
Right, so Patrice, you're correct that there are incentives built into our growth management system. They've been there for at least a decade, if not longer. How have they worked? Well, up until recently, I would say the track record has been not so great. They're incentives, they're not outright requirements. Now, that's really kind of changed in the last couple of years, where we made a change to the growth management system where we reserve a portion of the units of allocation, because there's a cap. Everybody knows there's a cap. And I think it's 25% are only available for affordable units. And so recently we've seen both Finney Crossing and Cotwood Crossing, those sort of the larger developments down in the Town Corners area, have committed to building a fairly significant number of affordable units. So long term, you know, the results we've gotten have been mixed at best, I think. More recently, it's, I think, perhaps a little more encouraging. Having said that, there's affordable housing and there's affordable housing. You know, how do you define affordability? You know, something's affordable to somebody depending on how much money they make. So we've tended to be largely successful in getting housing units that are affordable at 100% of the area median income, which in the affordable housing world, that's the low-hanging fruit, or that's the easy stuff. Getting housing units that are going to be affordable at 80% or at 60 or 65% of the area median income, you know, where you're actually really now, you're not just talking about middle-class people, you're talking about people who maybe have lower incomes. That's a much more, it's a tougher nut to crack. And so far we haven't been, I would say we haven't really been successful on that score.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I was at a Cottonwood meeting, and he had indicated he wasn't going to do any affordable housing. So how many units will he be adding, and how many units in Finney Crossing are currently built?
So I've got a big giant spreadsheet that we keep track of all of those things, and without that in front of me, any number I tell you, I can guarantee it would be wrong.
It'd be great, you know, maybe you can tell them the word, you know, and later, you know, whenever you have the information.
Right.
Just to, because it would be interesting to know the number.
Just real quick, I pulled up that report and just want to correct my statement a little bit. It's the National Low Income Housing Coalition. It says specifically for Williston, to afford a two-bedroom unit at 30% of your income, you'd have to make $28, over $28 an hour, $28.46. National minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. So for Vermont, at least, it doesn't say here for Williston, but for Vermont, it would take an 88-hour work week at minimum wage to afford a two-bedroom apartment.
Good, thank you. Yes.
I'm being optimistic here. When the ordinance, the housing trust ordinance is actually funded, and you're happy with the the rules around it, who would actually be would it be the select board, the DRB? Who would actually oversee it, and how would somebody apply for it? I'm just interested if you have even gone that far, or is it just in the bare beginnings?
Actually, all those issues are outlined in the draft ordinance. There's a provision for I believe it's a permanent committee on affordable housing, and they, the select board also have a role, but it's all spelled out in the draft ordinance.
Any other comments? Comments or questions from the select board? Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Good. We will discuss whether we are going to take a vote on this later in the meeting. I do need to get back to the subject that we needed to interrupt, which is the, thank you everybody for coming, which is the Catamount Forest Study Committee. And so according to what I have in front of me, we got through all the interviews. I assume Andrea is not here. She's from Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife, nor Ethan, the county forester. And I think I would recognize Kate if she was here from the Trust for Public Land. And then the only other person we haven't talked about so far, well, Melinda mentioned, is Anthony Jordick, who was asked by the or whatever, right where it is, from the Conservation Commission to attend. The two people who were not able, for whatever reason, to make it tonight were Jeff Dickerson and Court. If I remember correctly, Court was going to try to make it but couldn't. So I think the first question we have to, well, I guess I'm open for how to go about this, but to me, it's the advisory versus members, and you know, maybe if we can settle on who we feel should be advisory folks, then we can start to talk about members. But I'm totally open for how to proceed here. And I also will add, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, I don't see a big issue with going beyond the 7 to 10 that was in the policy, although I realize it would mean we need to amend the policy. But we could do that tonight.
I would recommend against it
because it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I would agree with you that I think if people want to participate and we don't have 100, you know, we have a reasonable number, then
yeah, everybody
let them participate.
Everybody who interviewed tonight would bring something to this committee.
I agree.
Yeah. I kept track of my applications, and I kind of do this by writing little notes like plus that type of thing, and everybody got a plus. So, but I don't think we can't make appointments tonight if it's in violation of the policy.
So we can, I guess that's true. Right.
Well, actually, we could make appointments for all the people who showed up. And then if we amended the policy, we could add the people that aren't here that are on the rec committees and all that, and amend the policy and add them later.
Okay.
So let people know that have come to.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems
reasonable.
So I would
Well, there were
entertain a motion.
There were town board members who were asked, well, they weren't asked not to show up, but they were told they need not show up. So I mean, would it make sense to make a motion to deal with those people first? The people who are already town board members, and we'll take them one at a time.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
I'd move to appoint Mike Klaus, Anthony Jordick, Benjamin King, and Rita Desow to the Catamount Community Forest Study Committee.
Second.
Terry, you look like you have a question.
Well, since we have 7 to 10, and will we have enough left to appoint the rest of the people who showed up? So
I think we will.
1, 2,
That's
3,
4.
4, 5, 6. So we have 6 that were showed up, and then that would make the full. Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me, Terry. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry, I got detained. I was coming from Canada.
Oh.
And I'm late.
Darn.
I was supposed to be here for some of the other interviews, so if I throw you off totally, fine. Come back another time with it. So.
No, we're still.
So that would put us at 11 if we added Court. But we could always add him later.
Yeah.
So
Okay, we should.
you're just too late, Court.
No.
But you're gonna make it. Turns out. You're gonna make the cut.
Okay.
Just not tonight.
Just not tonight.
Yeah.
Fine.
But we should interview Court
Yeah.
tonight. So,
Sure. Under the witness stand?
yes, right. The bright lights will be on you in a minute. Second. This is an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Okay.
And to briefly explain, why you would like to be on this committee, what you would bring to it, and then there might be some quick questions from us.
Okay, great. So I think the primary reason is I'm the vice president of the Catamount Outdoor Family Center board. I've been on that board, I think, for about 2.5 years now. I think prior to that, I think that the long history is I've been a Williston resident since 1993. I'd say both my children are, my youngest child's 19, 22, pretty much grew up at Catamount. They've been very active. They're running, mountain biking throughout their whole life. Our entire family has been a participant at Catamount and the activities of all the running and mountain biking, and have a lot of friends who participate there. So I think personally, Catamount's been a very big part of our life and the culture and everything surrounding that. And I think recently kind of devoting myself, being on the board, helping to transition kind of to a more independent board state and kind of help craft the future of Catamount was one of the more recent interests. So I think would be my brief synopsis.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Question about other uses. Are you open to other uses beyond what they've done so far?
I think we are. I think as part of the discussions with Melinda, we've talked to Melinda a little, and Kate about it. We put together a little package. I think we are open to other uses, as long as we can maintain within kind of the financial model, right? And I'm sure the town doesn't want to take on a huge burden. We have some parameters of which would be a burden, but I think anything that we can fit within that business model doesn't really perturb kind of the current user base too much. I think we would be open to discussion, right?
What I mean by this is, you talked about the business model.
Yeah.
But I look at this committee as sort of, its job is to come up with, the business model that might work in terms of, particularly in terms of things like impact on residents, in terms of taxes or
Sure.
what have you. So could you just explain that a little bit further? Maybe?
Yeah, so I agree. I look at this study committee as trying to create that business model going forward. I think we've made the assumption, right or wrong, right, that the town would not like to see a large burden. That an ideal state would be Catamount could do a lot of these services. It wouldn't be a tax burden on the community. And that is kind of the operating point or the lens at which we look at it, right? And so that's when we've already started to give some thought of, okay, with those parameters, what would the future look like? We do know in the town forest model that we lose pedestrian fees, so that is a source of our revenue. We do know that we still, to maintain some of our programs, we still need a building to operate in, and so we need to rent some of the buildings from the McCulloughs. And so there's some expenses that don't go away for us, right? And there's some revenue losses. And so we've been thinking, like, how do you work around that, right? How do you restructure within that original framework, okay?
So this is a little difficult question to ask.
Yes.
So I'll be kind of blunt if you don't mind. Does Catamount have to include the Catamount Outdoor Family Center, the nonprofit that's there now? You could see where there'd be a model that says, no, and I'm not. Please, I'm not advocating.
No. I could. Full kimono, like just kind of business looking at it, yes, it could devolve to a trail network with volunteers or someone who maintains it, and there's no public programs, and it's kind of like Heinsberg Town Forest.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
And maybe one of the mountain bike organizations would take over trail maintenance and.
Yes, right. And yes, I think that's one extreme. The other extreme says, yes, as a community, we value having the camps there. We value a lot of these other activities, and we put energy, the board puts energy into it, and we balance it through this model and say, yes, that's something as a community we value. And so I think you're right. You can land either of those extremes, anywhere in the middle. I think there's a lot of operating points.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for being late again. Sorry.
No, oh my goodness, thank you for making it.
So you made a motion and it was seconded?
For the first, not for the first.
Sorry, there's a motion on the table?
Yes.
And,
And seconded?
and no, any discussion? I probably forgot to ask that. Then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, so I would entertain a motion for the, the non-representing town committee members.
So I move to appoint James Diaz, Barb Evans, Patrice Maloney, Terry Marin, Ben Norris, and Steve Page to the Catamount Community Forest Study Committee.
Second.
Did I get everybody?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. So at this point,
Well,
we
there's,
have,
I have a question for there's an advisory. Do we actually officially appoint people to as an advisory role?
oh, okay.
That's up to staff to use at their discretion, and the committee.
Okay.
All right, okay.
But we still have Jeff Dickinson, who was not able to interview tonight, is still I'm going to say a question mark for lack of better words, whether we appoint him. And also Ethan Tapper, who Melinda recommends be a member because of his county forestry role and the impact he would have with the committee as being a voting member. And we still need to consider court, but we're outside the limit right now, so we can't.
So can we, do we ask that we put the policy on the next meeting for our revision?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and that will work?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to do it. I tentatively put it on this for your next meeting, but I'll have to see if the agenda works out, and I'll have to review it with Terry McCaig.
Okay.
But anyway, that's the goal, is to get it done soon.
Okay. And because it's a policy, we can adopt, or amend it in a relatively short amount of
Yes,
time?
yes.
And this would be a non-controversial, I assume?
I would expect so.
5 minute, yeah.
What's that?
Be a 5-minute
I
task.
would hope so, okay. So does all that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Good, thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on to transfer agricultural protection restrictions, Mahan Farm. Melinda, you're back.
Busy tonight.
I think Rick tries to schedule it this way.
Okay, I'll try to make this as quick as I can. It's a complicated issue.
Before you go, did anybody see the picture of the properties? I guess on the soft copy. Something was maybe wrong with it, because it wasn't attached to mine.
Right, nor was it in the hard copy, and I had emailed Melinda and let her know that it wasn't in the hard copy.
Oh, so she made copies.
Yep.
So we've had an issue come up with one of our well-known and popular town trails, the Allenbrook Nature Trail in the village. There's, let's see, I didn't keep a copy of the map, but on the map, there's the little loop, and then there's a trail that extends. The trail to the east is an existing trail. The trail that extends north to the west is a proposed trail that the Conservation Commission has been working on for several years to plan that trail. The trail extension goes through that parcel outlined in blue. And in February, we applied for a Recreation Trails grant to construct trail improvements in that parcel, and we discovered through communication with the Act 250 District 4 Commission that that parcel is actually, has been set aside for agricultural soil mitigation, and that they do not allow trails, they won't allow trails existing or proposed in that parcel. So because this is a pretty high priority for the Conservation Commission, the maintenance of those trails, they're very popular, and we have been communicating with the Act 250 District 4 Commission to try to come up with a solution to this. And the commission, the District 4 Commission Coordinator, Peter Keibel, suggested that we might be able to transfer that restriction off of the parcel and onto another parcel. So the parcel that we've looked at to for off-site mitigation is the Mahan parcel, which is currently owned by the town, but is not under a conservation restriction except for 20 acres along the western side. So we're proposing to apply to Act 250 to amend the land use permit to lift the restrictions on the Allen Brook parcel and put them onto the Mahan parcel. And I guess the town didn't really have any previous knowledge of these restrictions. It just recently came to light. And otherwise, I don't, this was a parcel that was purchased by the town in 2007 with the idea that there would be trails on the parcel and that it would be used for watershed protection, riparian restoration, et cetera. And so I think it's important and in keeping with town values to maintain those uses on the parcel and not to have to just give up the use of the trails, which are very popular. And so we're asking for the select board's approval to use the Mahan parcel for agricultural soil mitigation.
Can you explain what that means, agricultural soil mitigation?
So with development proposals that are under Act 250 jurisdiction, there's a requirement to mitigate for the loss of primary agricultural soils. And this particular parcel was part of a larger parcel where the Keystone development is. And so the Keystone development had to mitigate against the loss of 9 acres or a certain acreage of agricultural soils. And to do that, they set aside this parcel now owned by the town as mitigation. So that means that it's perpetually protected for agricultural uses. So meaning that if somebody wanted to farm there, they could go to the Agency of Agriculture, and the Agency of Agriculture would say, we have this parcel in Williston, you can farm it. It's protected into perpetuity for agriculture.
It's just interesting the way that works, because the parcel that they're taking to build on, I could see growing crops on. The parcel that they transferred is not a parcel that would ever or will ever be developed for agricultural use. It's like a giant floodplain. It's
Is there even access to it?
There's currently no easy access. There's no road frontage on it. So yeah, I agree with you.
It's kind of a strange way to look at that. But the other one, you said the west side, so I assume here towards the where the driving range was.
Correct.
Is conserved?
There was a conservation easement placed on 20 acres along the western edge. The town holds that easement, and it's for the purpose of stormwater mitigation for Maple Tree Place, as best as I understand.
Is that where Cottonwood Crossing is going?
No.
Oh.
It's currently a cornfield, if I, yeah, I don't know if it's in corn this year.
It is. It's currently being leased to a local farmer for corn production, has been for several years.
No, within the red. Within the
Right,
red.
but what's planned for here?
Oh, that is, what's it called?
Cottonwood?
Yes.
That's what I thought, okay, that's what I thought, okay, yeah,
but
that's the
area
side
in
of
red is
the
not,
west.
yeah.
Right. So you don't anticipate that you would ever want to, so if you wanted to build trails, or Cottonwood Crossings, they wanted to build trails someday, they wouldn't have the opportunity because that...
They could potentially build trails along the western side that would be excluded from
the conservation easement.
Agricultural soils mitigation, yeah.
The easement.
Yeah. But yeah, it would put restrictions on that piece of land.
You don't mind if I hop in? Those are a bit of my questions is, it looks like the acreage that was associated with, I think what you referred to as the Allen Brook parcel, is a lot less than the Mahan Farm parcel.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, at one point, was there thoughts that a trail would be developed along or parallel to Interstate 89? I guess my question is I understand and I support the concept of transferring the agricultural soils, whatever the right words are, from one parcel to the other. But I guess I'm a little concerned about losing all of the passive recreation type activities that could happen on the Mahan Farm if that's what this means when we transfer those agricultural soil, whatever.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for us all?
It does make sense, and again, there will be an area along this edge of the parcel that's not included in that, that's not restricted in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, there will be, the rest of it, we wouldn't be able to develop trails on the rest of it.
Actually, I'm wondering if there's a way we could at least reserve maybe so many feet from the Route 2 into the property that wouldn't become permanently conserved, so that we have the option of running a trail or something along Route 2.
Right.
Yeah. I think that there's probably enough acreage to do that, wouldn't there be?
Yeah, I mean, that we could certainly look at that again, and I think there would be an opportunity to carve some more land out of there. I am concerned that, or I guess there's already a requirement to, because of certain multipliers that they have for off-site mitigation, the town would be required to protect at least 23 acres. Right now, the part of the parcel that is proposed is like 38 acres, so there is room, but it's also right now very, it's more attractive given it's a large parcel, and they're more likely to accept something that sort of goes beyond the bare minimum, I think. I mean, they may not accept it at all, but.
That's a risk we're taking in a sense.
It's a risk, yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, how detailed do we have to be tonight? What do you need from us?
Conceptual, yeah.
I guess just approval to proceed with an Act 250 application to.
Sounds like a good idea, and it sounds like there are some other ideas that would tailor it a bit and possibly serve other needs, but those are probably going to be negotiated between the town and
Or is it Department of Ag?
Well, it's the commission that makes the decision. The Department of Ag has I asked them to look at this parcel and see if, you know, the acreage and whatnot would meet their criteria, and they did do a review of the proposed parcel and said that it would meet their criteria, but that it was over the acreage that was, you know, it was over the minimum acreage.
So it's not a 1-for-1 then?
It's not. No, they have.
Why is that?
Just off-site somehow, that makes a difference.
Because it looks like it's, you said it's a cornfield now, so it's actually agricultural, farmable area, and it's much better than what we had.
Right. I agree, which is one reason I think it'd be attractive, but, you know.
So in terms of, so we would move to authorize the transfer, but could we give direction, Rick, that says, you know, we would like to give as little as possible of that, right? And like you said, if we could have a strip along the roads or I don't know, if along the freeway, if that makes sense, to make sure we have some trail space.
I'd leave that up to the Conservation Commission to sort of decide, you know, where it would be the best place. They know better than I would. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe, right, maybe it's better along Route 2.
Wherever,
as
yeah.
opposed to the interstate.
There's wetlands as you get close to the interstate, so that might be problematic for any kind of use.
Put it where it makes, yeah.
So I sensed in Ted's comments earlier that it is getting late, and we still have a lot to do tonight, so.
This issue will come back for us to micromanage later.
So, with that comment, I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to authorize the transfer of a perpetual protection of agricultural uses and accompanying restrictions from a parcel adjacent to the Keystone subdivision, formerly owned by Al Senecal, to the Mahan Farm parcel south of Route 2.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Good job, Ben. Yep. Look forward to seeing how that works out. Comprehensive Plan Review. What's that?
How long will we run that?
Well, they're scheduled for 45 minutes, so we could cut them short.
Oh, no.
Go short.
I was not suggesting
Talk
that.
fast.
What sections are we starting with, like what numbers?
So the list of chapters that Terry McCaig had suggested we focus on included chapters 3, 5, 6, and 11. I'm Ken Beliveau here with some of the members of the Planning Commission, and we're here to try to address some of the specific issues in the town plan. Hopefully, you have some questions about things that are of particular concern to you that will enable us to, to move forward. As I mentioned in the email that I sent to you late last week, Terry McCaig sent me an email with a list of some potential, corrections and/or questions. There were a number of typos, some things having to do with capitalization of words like state and town, and staff met with Terry, and we have started to, make some of those suggested changes. Terry also suggested that the 4 chapters that I mentioned, land use, housing and growth management, transportation, and energy, be the ones that we focus on. So I have not received any comments from any of the rest of you, so that's what we have to work with so far. So with that said, how
what would be helpful to the select board?
What works for me is just starting and, maybe quickly, but going through it, from page, sort of page one, not page one, but the first page of the chapters.
Page 11.
Yeah, page 11, and.
Okay, so, the land use chapter, we've already been through some of the data and an overview of the entire plan. The land use chapter is arguably the one chapter where it really brings together almost all of the various aspects of the plan together. And it ultimately culminates in the land use plan map. And that contains elements of virtually all the policies that are contained within the plan. So in the Williston Town Plan, this is not necessarily a new thing. It has its origins going back at least 20 years. Is the town has had this overarching theme in the land use plan that we would try to limit the pace of growth and development, that we would try to direct where development occurs to be concentrated in the Taft Corners area, which is now known as our state designated growth center, and that simultaneously we would make efforts to preserve the countryside as open space and as a working landscape. And in a nutshell, that's essentially what the land use plan calls for. And so when you look at the land use plan map and you see this big dark red area right there in the Taft Corners area, and there's a boundary around it for our state designated growth center, it becomes the heart of the whole plan. There are other things that are intertwined with that, but essentially that's the central concept. Within the growth center, the policy that's embedded in the plan, and this is not new, what the policy says is that the town will encourage and support a design-conscious, pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use development and redevelopment pattern in the Taft Corners area. The town has worked towards this objective by successfully obtaining growth center designation in 2008 and revising our bylaws accordingly. The town envisions the majority of new growth and development activity taking place in the growth center. The town will continue to support this objective by encouraging the construction of planned infrastructure in the growth center, concentrating new development in the growth center, and examining and monitor the effectiveness of its bylaws. Again, it's not a new concept, and really a key part of what is embedded in the draft of this plan is that policy continues into the future, that there has been, at least in the past, largely widespread agreement that and the town folk about that's the overall direction of the town plan, and we're not proposing to change that at the time being.
And the boundaries of the growth center, those are hard and fast, and there's no emphasis on changing those boundaries. I assume there must be a mechanism to do that, but there's no.
It's a good question, Jeff. I don't know the answer to that. So, Williston's Growth Center was the first designated in the state. It's a 20-year, the approval says that a majority of new growth and development has to take place in the growth center over a 20-year period of time. We are due for our second 5-year review this fall. So we've been doing it for going on 10 years now. We've never had any discussion about changing the boundary of that. I suppose theoretically it's possible, but it certainly hasn't been discussed by us.
Need is not arising in any way. And whether changing it might even be making it smaller. I'm not necessarily talking about expanding it, but just depending on how things work out, you could see where you might want to change it over time. Thoughts that you had 10 years ago may not have bared fruit, and it's so
So thus far, it hasn't come up as a discussion item, and I would imagine theoretically it's possible, but certainly we haven't had that discussion with the state. So,
Can I ask, the gateway districts that we amended one, a year ago?
Yes.
Those are are those considered part of the growth center?
So we created one new gateway zoning district there along Williston Road, and it is just outside of the growth center. The net effect of that so far has been nothing. Now, at some point, somebody with a property in there will do something, but no changes have actually been implemented there so far, but it is outside of the growth center.
Which actually, I always envisioned that as kind of a segue into the Taft's Corners area, so I guess in some way conceptually that kind of changes the boundary. I mean, not the hard and fast boundary, but. Right.
I think the thing with the growth center is that it comes with, because of its state recognition or state designation, it comes with both requirements, but also it comes with, I don't know what the right way to put it is, but you have more latitude in terms of things like density and, I don't know, Ken, help me out here.
Sure. So you were just talking about the mitigation for the loss of prime agricultural soils, for example. If a property were to develop in the growth center, how the state would handle that particular question is different, for example. There's also another criteria under Act 250, I think it's called Criteria 9L, which is they have to make a finding pertaining to urban sprawl. And if a property is located in a state-designated growth center, that analysis is completed. You just check it off. You check it off the list. So those would be a couple of things. When we apply for things like grants with the state, in the scoring criteria, we get more points for having a state-designated growth center. So that this type of a policy approach to our land use scheme is something that the town has pursued. It helps us to fare better in the competition for state grants. So.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Can I just ask, section 3.1.5, the form-based code?
Yes.
Just my understanding is that like the town would be more interested in what the buildings looked like and how big they were and their relationship to pedestrian flow or something. I mean, I didn't really understand the concept.
Well, you're not alone.
As long as it's a rectangle, you can.
So the idea of a form-based code is a relatively new concept. I sometimes refer to it as the planning technique du jour, but this is the direction that in the land use world that everybody is sort of migrating towards. Traditionally, land use regulations are based on what's called a Euclidean zoning ordinance, where you divide the town into zoning districts, and then you have a list of uses that are allowed in each of these zoning districts, and that's the basis of your zoning code. And so we have some form-based elements already in our bylaw, especially in the Taft Corners area, but we don't have a true form-based code. We still have largely a what I would call a Euclidean type zoning set of zoning regulations. In a form-based code, it's more focused on what is the form of the development would take. So what would be the size, the bulk, the location of the building on the property, in particular its location and how it interacts with the street. That's probably what I would say would be the single kind of defining characteristics of what a form-based code is. But it's something, the way we have it written here in this objective, Ted, is that it's not so much that we would say we would adopt one, but it's something to consider. And as we've discussed it with the Planning Commission, so other folks on the commission have sort of expressed some sort of similar levels of lack of a good understanding about what that is. So we would understand that any efforts along those lines would include just educating and informing people as to what a form-based code is and how that would be different from what we have now.
Oval-shaped chartreuse correctional facility.
Sure. That would be one of many options.
Just throwing it out.
I assume that would be a huge undertaking, is to change to form-based.
Yes.
Okay. And would it apply to all zones in town or just some, such as the growth center area?
That would be a question.
To be determined.
Okay. Because, well, enough. Yeah, okay.
I think what you'll find if you look around, certainly in Vermont, where, we're a state of small towns by and large. In a state of Vermont where a town like Williston at 9,500 people is considered a big place, tells you how small of a place we are. But I would think its application would be best suited to places where you have some sort of concentrated development, like in the Taft Corners area. And it might have some applicability in other areas as well, but I would think, at least at this point in time, that would be the place it would be best applied towards.
But you, I was interrupted.
No, it's quite well, I was thinking the village would be potentially another place.
Could be, yeah.
But Taft's Corners is pretty well developed. I mean, it's not entirely developed, of course, but, so you're thinking of all the small side streets or additional retail?
So you're correct in pointing out, Terry, that there is a lot of development that is there now, but certainly not all of Taft Corners is developed. So I'd use one example to highlight the difference between sort of a traditional set of zoning regulations and a more form-based code. So when you look at, say, Maple Tree Place, with the exception of a couple of the restaurants, one of the things you notice is all the buildings are set way, way back from the street. And that's kind of traditional suburban development. You have a setback, which is a minimum setback, and we say you got to be at least this number of feet away from the front property line. And then you put the parking all around the buildings. In a form-based code, you have a pattern that's more like the other side of the street. So on the other side of Route 2A, where you see Verizon and Panera Bread and CVS, those buildings are all built up right to the sidewalk. That's a very basic form-based code type concept. The building comes up to the street. So there is a setback, but we say it's not understood so much as a setback, like a minimum setback. It's a build-to line. We say you got to be set back this number of feet from the property line, and by the way, your building needs to come right up to this line. Again, it's wanting to have that building up close to the street, so that building has a much better relationship to the street and a sidewalk that would parallel where those building fronts are as well. So those are just a couple of examples of some key form-based code concepts.
Yeah, just not sure I'd like that. I don't know. It reminds me more of suburbia in a big town or a big city, but I imagine there are all kinds of different forms. So,
yeah, so as I said, it's being identified as something for the town to look at. And also, again, in my example, we already have some of these form-based elements in our zoning regulations as they are today.
Question?
yeah, so on 3.2.1, you have this 25-75 rule. And I know a lot of, or most of the developments built probably in the last 20 years or so have this kind of structure where there's a bunch of open land associated with the development. But that doesn't always result in parks, right? For instance, the open land in our neighborhood is all wetland. In fact, it's class something wetland that you can't do anything on. You can barely walk on it. And is there any thought to promote more public park area than these neighborhood parks? And the neighborhood parks aren't usually open to any, well,
General public.
cross, I think of cross-pollination, but, they're not open to gatherings of people outside of that one little neighborhood. And that's if you have common land that's actually usable. Some places do. I've lived in 2 developments in Williston, and one had some usable space, partially usable, that they put a couple of facilities on. But the one we're in now has basically, we're going to hopefully connect to the trail system if Melinda gets that parcel moved. It's just, I think that promotes a certain kind of structure that the developers are building, and I don't think it's necessarily the friendliest structure. I'd rather, to me, from a town perspective, for me, I enjoy going on the bike path that goes around the school and the paths that Melinda has built to see people outside of my neighborhood, I guess, to some extent. And it just, the 2575 just seems, I don't know.
Okay, so the question you've asked is incredibly complicated, but I'm going to start with 3.2.1 right on its face.
Yep.
So 3.2.1 is referring to, right now we have a requirement for lands in the agricultural rural residential zoning district. This is the only district it applies to. Not all of Williston, but just that one particular zoning district. If you have a parcel of land that's greater than 10.5 acres, you are a property owner, you want to develop your land, you've got a parcel of land, let's say it's 50 acres. 50 acres is greater than 10.5 acres. That means that a minimum of 75% of the land area of that parcel, or 37.5 acres, would have to be designated as permanently protected open space. So as much as the growth center is one of the key concepts of where we want to encourage and promote development, the preservation of open space in the agricultural to preserve open space in the rural part of town.
So that wouldn't, no, so maybe I'm not thinking of the same area. I'm thinking of the areas like where South Ridge is, and so that's not.
That's not.
So
this pertains specifically to the agricultural rural residential zoning district. So that's part one of the answer, that this particular objective applies to that. The second part to the answer is that when somebody comes in to develop their land, they want to know, it's like, well, what are the development standards? What's the density? What can I do? And so they say, so our property owner, in my example, they've got a 50-acre piece of land, and they come in and they say, well, what do I got to do? And we say, well, first of all, we're going to have to do a constraints analysis. We're going to have to identify any steep slopes. We're going to have to identify wetlands. We're going to have to do an assessment. And any of those areas that are designated to be of prime importance to be preserved, those all have to be in the open space. So that you've already identified that you know of an open space area near your house where there's a wetland there, there's a reason for that. And the reason is we really don't want any development to be in the wetland.
Of course.
We want it to be protected. And so sometimes what's in an open space, its value may not be that great as a traditional park per se, but it may be a great value from the preservation of a natural resource area, for protection of water quality, wildlife habitat, or a number of other things that are embedded in that open space.
So we don't have any requirement for these developments to use all the open space other than preserving natural habitat because of their Class 2 wetlands or?
So in the ARZD, the emphasis on open space is the preserving of open space, not sort of the maximizing of its intensive use. Now, having said that, we always look for opportunities to get a trail easement, just as you were talking about a few minutes before we came up. That's how we get some of those trail easement kinds of things. So we do look for those opportunities. But what I would say is that in most cases, what you have within that open space area is going to be what I would call, for lack of a better word, passive recreation. People are able to enjoy the view shed, perhaps they're able to walk out there. We wouldn't necessarily see them as being prime sites to develop a park per se. And certainly in the ARZD, where you're looking for really, really low-intensity development.
Understand, yep, yep.
Now, when we get to, I believe it's chapter 9, there's a whole discussion about various types of parks. And so, what you may want to do, Terry, is you may want to look through some of that stuff, because we have a variety of park types that we think about, including some that are just, it might be what you think of as a pocket or a neighborhood park. It's just for the benefit of that neighborhood. The town also has policies and plans pertaining to the development of 2 large, basically townwide parks. The park that's over here behind the Williston Central School, and the park that is still being developed right now at the Allenbrook School. So that's where you see the concentration of things like ball fields and things of that sort.
Yep.
So.
Just a quick question about this, the 75-25. Is there any emphasis on, you have 2 parcels, this is for argument's sake, they're both 100 acres, so the concept is 25 can be developed for, let's say, residential housing, 75 is left as open space. So that those 2 pieces of open space that come from the 2 separate developments actually are contiguous, so that you actually get the 75 plus 75 equals 150 acres of open space versus 2 smaller 75. I guess, I don't know if coordination is the right word, but is there any effort in that area?
So we're always looking to see how, so things can be, put together in an effective fashion. One of the things that tends to work in our favor on that score is things that are what we would consider to be constraints upon the land, like steep slopes and wetlands. They don't know any property boundaries. So if there's a ridge, for example, that ridge is going to span multiple properties. If there's let's say it's the Allenbrook. The Allenbrook crosses how many parcels of land? I don't know. I couldn't count them. So those would be some examples. But yes, by design, we would want to try to have areas of open space. An area of open space on one parcel be next to an area of open space on an adjoining parcel.
And it happens organically, if you will, or naturally to a large degree also, it sounds like. Yeah, okay. Good.
So in the rest of Chapter 3, there's some detailed discussion about the various zoning districts, and there are various policies within it. There are a few potential changes to the land use plan. So 6 years ago when we did this, there were a small number of things that we identified that we would look at to potentially change or address in the land use plan. The ones that come to mind, Ted, you've already asked about the Gateway zoning district. That was an issue that we said we would look into, which we did. Another that we said we would look into was having to do with lakeshore protection around Lake Iroquois. That was also something that we did. And is there anything else on our list that we had to do, big things? I can't recall. So we have a different short list of things to address in the plan. So one of them under 3.7. So we require today, there's a 150-foot watershed protection buffer along any named stream. So there was a time in Williston's past where we did not require that. And a couple of years ago, we did a public education effort with some property owners who had lands next to wetlands. And one of the things we came to discover is there's a whole bunch of properties up on the Sucker Brook whose houses are within 150 feet of the watershed protection buffer. And they said, holy cow, what does this mean for me? And, so it creates some potential challenges should somebody want to do an addition onto their house. Under the current regulations, they wouldn't be able to get a permit because they have a non-conforming structure today. So this item was identified and put into the plan as saying, okay, we've got these non-conformities. We need to kind of scratch our heads and think about, are there ways in which we might make some modifications to our zoning regulations that might create some more options for property owners in this situation?
So this protection buffer, because I come up and down Old Stage, daily, and there's new houses built right above Allenbrook. I mean, kind of right on top of Allenbrook.
Where are you referring to?
Churchview Estates or Churchview. Those houses, their decks are like 10 feet off the ground because they're sloping into the brook. The ground is, so that wasn't a watershed protection.
Well, it is, but it doesn't start at the top of the slope. The watershed protection buffer starts at the, I don't know the technical word is, but it's near the edge of where the stream is.
Right,
so that slope, what you're seeing as the top of the slope, that whole slope is what the watershed protection buffer is.
Yeah, I can't believe it's 150 feet. It's not 50 feet if I think about it, but I guess I don't know how they measure it.
It may not have been 150 feet.
Oh, it would have been 150 feet.
Was it?
It would have been 150 feet.
It's confusing then. It always bothers me because we have all this stormwater stuff going on and these houses are just being built. And maybe it is 150 feet, maybe because of the slope, I can't tell.
Doesn't look it or something.
It certainly doesn't look it, but it was just a question because I go by it every day and I look at it and I wonder, why did they let that house be built there?
It's a steep slope.
Yeah, it is, right, yeah. Okay.
So. And so, we identified considering a form-based code. We have already started the process of working with the Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee on doing some work around adopting a village master plan. We see this as a carryover item, something that we started going back a year or so ago, and that would be completed into the life of the new plan. And so that we have that identified as an objective under 3.6.1.
And Ken, how would that differ from the zoning that's already in place for the village district?
Well, since we don't know what the plan is yet, I can't answer that.
Let me ask the question differently. What would the master plan do that's different than the zoning that's already in place for the village district? I'm trying to understand, we already have zoning in place for the village. What would it be that the master plan would do that's on top of or different or parallel to the zoning that's? Matt?
I'm gonna turf that to Matt. He's our village guy.
So the first part is that the master plan backs away and looks at the village in a little more of a broad way. So it doesn't just look at the land use picture, it looks at the transportation picture in terms of Route 2 running through the village and the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in the village. It also looks at the fabric of the village in terms of the historic buildings that exist there and what's the town's performance been in terms of trying to maintain those and enhance their presence, integrate new development into the village. And then finally, I think based on some of the public input we saw last spring, there's a strong desire for the village to be a vibrant place where stuff happens. That's not really something you can regulate. That's a programmatic element that the plan's going to have to call for. So there's land use, there's transportation, there's programmatic stuff in there. And one piece of that is to look at the performance of the land use standards as they've existed, for a long time, and certainly since the new bylaw was adopted in June of 2009, and say, how are we doing? How are we achieving the goals that the town has stated and will restate in that master plan?
Planning and zoning, land use regulation is always a compromise. In the village, there's a lot of tension between preservation and flexibility. The desire to preserve everything and the high cost of doing that. The desire for the village to be diverse and vibrant and have lots of different uses in it, and the fear that that's going to bring something undesirable to the village. And so master plan is a chance to check in with the community, state those goals in an organized way, and then some of the objectives coming out of that might be to examine adjusting zoning. Some of them might have nothing to do with zoning at all. They might be looking at the streetscape, which was done in prior master plans, saying, we want cast iron light posts and sidewalk enhancements and things like that. Or it might be saying, we want to open the door to have food trucks be able to vend on town band nights on the green, which, again, very little to do with land, it's much more of a programmatic thing. So that's really where I see that document going right now, is to pull that all together and then go off into these various work plan items, some of which will land with planning and some of which may not.
Yeah, okay. That's good, thank you.
The last thing that I was going to identify that we call for, us doing something different in terms of the land use plan is objective 3.7.2, which is to consider changes to allow uses, to the allowed uses in the industrial zoning district west, in the areas, the area next to the business park and the mixed-use commercial zoning districts. So this is the area that's just to the west of where Blair Park is and that area there. There's as you may recall from some of the discussions we had about the Gateway zoning district, the way the zoning map is set up, where Commerce Street is in that area, it's not the way they teach you to do it in planning school, I'll just put it that way. So it creates some conflicts. That you have a sliver of industrial zoned land sandwiched between a residential neighborhood and the business park neighborhood it's just, if you propose that in your senior thesis, you wouldn't graduate. But it got there for whatever reason, it got there, and when you go to change zoning maps, it's often easier said than done, but it's something that we think is worth taking a crack at least, to see if we can address some of that.
Where is Commerce Street?
So Commerce Street would be where the new industrial building that was just built. It's on the south side of Williston Road, in between South Brownell Road and where Harvest Equipment is, if you know where Harvest Equipment is.
Oh, okay.
So if you're traveling west on Williston Road, you would see Commerce Avenue would come up shortly after that, would be over on your left. So that's zoned industrial in there. So you have actually some houses in people living in mobile homes, and then you have an industrial zoning district, and then you have people living in single-family houses. Again, it's not an ideal, kind of environment. And a similar scenario over on the north side of Williston Road as well. So like where Overhead Door is, that's zoned industrial. There's even a couple of properties that are addressed off of Blair Park Road that are zoned industrial, and they back up against residential neighborhoods, and it's, it may not be an easy fix, but it's something that should be looked at. So that's what I got on Chapter 3, unless there are other specific questions. I certainly would encourage you to take a look at the land use plan map. For those of us in the planning office, this is like embedded into our brain. And it does really, it forms the core of a lot of the policies that are included in the town plan. And so I strongly suggest spending some time taking a look at it.
But take that the next step, taking a look at it with what type of an eye, I guess maybe I would ask.
Just to understand sort of spatially all the stuff we've been talking about here tonight in terms of where are the lands that we're looking to preserve, where we're looking to concentrate development, and that you have a sense of what's the proportionality between those two things. Because there's a big difference in the proportion. You know, the growth center, for example, represents about 5% of the land area in the town.
Where I was going with this is, my sense is it's Williston, in many, you know, we've been doing planning through the town comprehensive planning process for what, 20, 25 years now? And this isn't meant to be a negative, this is meant to be a positive comment, although it may come out sounding a little bit negative, is we've established a pattern that appears to be working. So I don't think I should be looking at that with kind of the goal of, oh, let's upset the apple cart here, because it's more, I guess more, if anything, it would be tweaking and not wholesale changes, because that could be, I don't want to say disastrous, that's not the right word, but just overbearing, you know, all of a sudden saying, you know, this shouldn't be medium density residential anymore, maybe it should be, you know, I don't know what, industrial or farmland or, I don't know, am I making sense there? I guess I'm a little I'm a little just wondering how much does it make sense to tweak that?
Well, and I'm not suggesting that you look at it to say we need to...
Just more to understand it.
And in fact, as we started the discussions going back to before we really formally opened it up with the Planning Commission, and some of the early conversations I had with the Select Board as it was composed back 2 and 3 years ago, one of the starting hypotheses that we started with was the assumption that there was still general agreement in the core direction of that land use plan. And that we were not looking to, you know, come up with something brand new out of whole cloth, but that was a policy direction that had been started going back a couple of decades. It's been refined over the years, and that's really what we're looking to do at this point in time.
Thank you for saying much more eloquently, which I mumbled my way through. And that gets back to a little bit my comment about the growth center, and are we looking to change those boundaries? And the answer is no, because it appears to be working.
Yeah, and I think the way I would put it is it's more evaluating what our regulations are to implement it. Are they effective enough? Are they effective in the right way? Do we need to be making some adjustments, you know, to them? We have made some adjustments to them already since we started, some relatively minor ones, but there may be others that are called for as well.
All right, good, thank you.
So I guess my question for the Select Board is, how much more do you want to keep doing here tonight? I know you have a lot of items on your agenda.
We do.
My question too.
And it is 10 after 9, and we are 40 minutes ago, we were supposed to be off the comprehensive plan review and on to the various rates we still need to do tonight.
To be fair, this, obviously, we were running behind schedule before we even got to this.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, that was not at all, I'm just trying to, no, that was not where I was going. It's that this is purely, you know, where we are, and we still have a lot of meeting to go.
So I would recommend maybe we could adjourn this and ask these people to volunteer to come back another time. Is that within the possibility, or can we speed up the process tonight? What's our deadline on this?
I don't think we can speed up.
Just to make one little suggestion, it would be really helpful if we could have some questions from you folks, like very much the kinds of things you asked tonight. If we could get those by email, say ahead of time, and run through things fairly quickly, we would be happy to do that. You know, we'll go at the pace that you need, but it would be more efficient for you, which you tend to have very, very crowded agendas. If we had a few questions, or even if you look at those target chapters that Terry had identified, and, you know, each of you thinks, all right, if I have space for one question, what would it be? Or two questions, you know, some kind of like mechanism so that we can move through things. It's in all of our interest to get a plan through this process, and a thorough deliberation, but still moving along.
that balance there. And what is our schedule again?
We're behind.
I knew
Way
that.
behind.
Yeah.
What's the
Should we have a
deadline?
special meeting?
We're behind.
Well,
Is there a deadline?
The plan has already expired, and it expired quite a while back.
Yeah.
We cannot adopt any new regulations until we adopt a new plan. So that's your deadline.
Terry and I were just briefly talking, I mean, we should explore various options. One might be having a special meeting.
I had suggested that earlier, but, you know, for a variety of reasons, it just didn't work out, but perhaps sometime next month.
Yeah,
Seems like we need it to get through it, yeah.
summers are tough, but,
Your agendas are pretty full.
yeah.
There's lots of issues. We're getting behind, but anyway.
I make a comment on your behalf, having my brief tenure of sitting on your board. They do a very thorough review and vetting when they're going through this, so by the time it's coming up to us, I can see where Megan's coming from easily, which is they need a pretty concise list of questions or directions so that they're not going
Yeah.
through.
And I would add that it's actually this type of process that works best for me. This, you know, kind of starting at the beginning of a chapter and working through it versus me necessarily reading through it and trying to come up with, you know, do I come up with a gazillion small questions, or how can I boil it down to a couple key questions? And so anyway, that doesn't work as well for me. That's my own personal style.
I think we will work, I'll communicate with the board, and we'll see if we can find a date where we can just focus just on this.
Yeah.
And maybe get through the rest of it. We still have to hold another public hearing, too.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I would remind, so the last time I was here, you know, we prepared
Right.
this matrix, and this, if you look at this, this will identify for you when there's something that's in the plan now that wasn't there before, or something that was in the plan before and it's not in here now, and that might help to focus some of your questions, because that's basically highlighting how it's different from before. So, but we put this together as a tool to help you to work through it.
One other, Rick, when do we normally hold our retreat?
There is no normal, but usually it's, I would say, over the summer months, by the time we get around to it normally. And this, what I was thinking of is this would serve as the retreat.
Yeah, this, okay. We're on the same wavelength there, okay. All right, thank you.
There is some good stuff, though. Some of the questions you asked about the village, I'm really interested in what you guys come up with for the kind of re-envisioning the village a little bit, because I find it, when I go through it, sometimes I think, gosh, it feels like it could be more for such a town as Williston. It, just more of a, and not such a traffic jam sometimes.
So we're adjourning on this issue and moving on to the other items?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Moving on
right.
to the
Okay.
municipal tax rate. Jessica, finally.
Jennifer.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, Jennifer, finally.
And Mr. Chair, after, I'm going to ask if the board would consider taking an item out of order. We'll do this next item, next tax rate, but I'd like to, since Jennifer's here, maybe also do the police collective bargaining agreement.
Yep.
She's done most of the analysis on the
Makes sense.
changes, so it might be
Yep.
easier.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey.
After a big meeting so far, just a little agenda item we have here, setting the tax rate for next fiscal year. So obviously, the budget has already been approved for the town, and that was a townwide budget of $10,616,000. And this requires a portion to be raised from property taxes. Others areas are local option tax, pulling from reserves, some other areas like that. But the portion that's being raised from property tax is $5,125,831. And based on where our grand list is right now, the calculation, as I calculated it out for you all here, is to keep our tax rate the same as it was last year. So we're pretty happy to be able to do that and still make the investments that we made through the budget process of adding a couple new positions to town, adding a new highway vehicle, and all the items that we put into the budget this year.
Changing and using the, what's the fund we use when we sometimes use it to help offset tax increases?
Fund balance.
Fund balance. The assumption is still the same on the fund balance. Not the assumption, the use of the fund balance, I'm sorry.
For next fiscal year, the same amount that we requested through the budget process.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. We didn't change anything from the budget that was approved by the town on March 7th.
So the budget that was approved in the last election assumed that there would have to be an increase in the property tax.
It did assume that because our grand list value was lower.
But because the grand list value is increased more than we expected, the tax rate will not go up, it will stay the same.
Yes.
It's pretty amazing that it was the change in the grand list that allows this to occur.
Yes.
Wow.
Pretty big properties. There still is the deadline for grievances is next week of June 28th. And Bill Hinman wasn't expecting to see a large amount of change in the grand list through that grievance process.
And all the appeals that have been filed earlier have all been resolved. We have no outstanding legal appeals at this point.
Okay, great. I will entertain a motion.
Move to set the municipal tax rate at $0.265 for fiscal year 2018.
Second, sorry.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great.
Yeah, I should say the tax bills, we don't know when exactly they're going to be going out because we're waiting to find out what the state is going to do with their budget. So that may create a problem for us.
Oh, really? Oh, because it's so late? Oh, okay, interesting.
The biggest part of the tax bill is the state school education taxes, and we'll have those at. There's the,
So what happens if we, we'll talk about that later, okay?
yeah, it may delay sending out the bills. We'll have to see. We don't know yet until the.
Okay. If while you're signing, we can move on to the sewer, oh, I'm sorry, no, move on to the police contract.
Now, the, I think, I'll let Jennifer take over, but I want to comment that in her memo, I think we had referred to the fact that the copy of the collective bargaining agreement was attached. It was not attached. It is in the folder now, and I gave Caper copies as well. Part of the reason it wasn't attached is we hadn't 100% finalized it until today. We are waiting for the union to ratify it, and they have done that. And there are a couple very, very minor, or actually only really one minor tweak, which was not substantive. And so other than that, that's what we have. So why don't you go through the specifics?
Yeah.
Great. So I put together, highlighted the different areas where there were changes in the contract. Overall, the most part, this is a mature contract. There wasn't a lot of language changes that needed to happen. I think, Rick, maybe we had one grievance during the contract period, so really not a lot to discuss as far as language. It really came down to economics, healthcare, retirement, and wages is really what happened there. We'll talk about the benefit piece first. So the benefit changes, the union was asking to move from retirement plan B, which is where the town is right now, to retirement plan C. That's what a lot of law enforcement personnel have retirement plan C. It allows for the earlier retirement age. I believe we discussed this with the board, maybe in executive session during the contract period. We decided to move to that plan. That will not take effect, though, until July 1st of 2018. That gives us the opportunity to budget for that properly. It also gives the state an opportunity to send out to all the current law enforcement officers what their retirement benefits would look like. Because current officers have the option to stay in Plan B or move to Plan C. Any new employees that are hired after that July 1st, 2018, those officers will automatically be enrolled in Plan C. To offset some of this expense, we are asking for more of a contribution to their health insurance. That'll also take place on that July 1st, 2018. The other change was in wages. They did a lot of work on wages, sent us a lot of contracts. We did our analysis, they did their analysis. We had some disagreements about what is a comparable town to ours. There was a lot of discussion about Shelburne, which seems very similar to ours, but their wage scale is quite a bit different than our wage scale. But we were able to come to an agreement where we were able to increase our sergeant wages 3%. From where they're currently at, and each step went up 3%. Officers, each step went up 2%. And then we're moving to a cost of living adjustment that is based on the same calculation. It just sets a minimum of 1% and a maximum of 3%.
What's the difference to Shelburne?
They don't have a I shouldn't say rational. It's not a logical, I don't know how to easily say it.
It's a $10 difference at the highest end of the scale between the average amount and what a Shelburne officer or sergeant. No, it's an officer because they don't have sergeants there. So we weren't really able to understand their.
So what they did is they increased the range for this one individual because that person had been there a long time, but they weren't a sergeant, so they said, well, we'll basically pay you a sergeant's pay, but you're still an officer. I think that's the rationale, but.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of a discrepancy, so we were showing the averages with Shelburne, without Shelburne, and we got in, it was an interesting conversation. But
labor contract equivalent of spot zoning.
That's
something, it was definitely out of line with where other municipalities are with their 20-year.
And for the past, I don't know how many years, 3, 4, I guess 3 years anyway, we've based the actual cost of living on the cost of living index. Most towns do not do that, though. When they give a cost of living index or increase, they give something generally more than that. So last year, the employees got 0 increase because that's what the cost of living index was. But the other towns were giving 1, 2, 3%. And so we got behind over the period of this past contract. And so that's why you're seeing some of these increases that we've agreed to, because we want to remain competitive. And as it is, we are having a very difficult time attracting officers. And it's not just Williston, of course, it's throughout the state. And at least we won't lose ground with this contract.
Okay. You've capped on both, I say you, the agreement proposes to cap on both ends the cost of living, a minimum of 1, max of 3. And that's part of, that I assume will become part of this agreement, or will, if we go with this agreement. What's the impact on the non-union town employees and the other union that we have?
Well, the fire is basically the same, 1% and 3 or 4% cap.
Okay, so they have the same concept at least.
And for the non-union, we've been treating them the same as the police. So last year, they got a 0 cost of living increase, and we're proposing that they be the same as the police as far as cost of living, so 1%. Effective July 1st, 2018.
Okay, but I guess my point was along the lines also, is in a future year, if the cost of living, whatever index you use shows less than 1%, we'll probably have to live with 1% with the non-union employees because we don't want a disparity between union and non-union. So that's a piece of the puzzle that we have to consider about whether, we agree with this. Yeah, okay.
And then all the other changes down at the bottom are just language changes, a couple typo things. There was one change to how they bid for shifts. And the chief was okay with the recommended change. It doesn't affect anyone that's currently in position. It would just protect future employees from being able to. Their scenario that they used is if somebody had been a 13-year officer but a 1-year sergeant, and somebody had been a 4-year sergeant. Right now, the way the contract reads, that 1-year sergeant would be able to bid for shifts before the 4-year sergeant would be, because he'd been at the town longer. And they just wanted to clean that up so it was per grade. However long you were in your grade is how you were able to bid for shifts.
Okay.
And the chief agreed with that change.
I've never had a bid for a shift, so I don't really
Yes.
know exactly how that works, but we're okay with, we're the town with what was proposed, okay.
Any other questions? It was a very respectful process. It was actually really, everyone was very kind and open and just all working toward creating a good contract for our officers, but also not creating a burden for the town.
There were less than 6 meetings, I think, from start to finish.
Good, thank you. Entertain a motion?
I move to authorize the manager to sign the collective bargaining agreement with the New England Benevolent Association Local 409 for the period of July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Any discussion? Just a real quick thing, I'm not thrilled, if you will, with the putting the minimum on the cost of living increase, but it's not enough to have me object to this. So, time to vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. So, next we get to move on sewer allocation rates.
The rate that staff is recommending is the same as the rate that is currently in place. And it's based on the fact that that is the amount we are paying to the Village of Essex Junction for sewer allocation.
And sorry, I quickly I would entertain a motion.
Move to set the sewer allocation charge at $10 per gallon effective July 1st, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Stormwater fees.
Staff is recommending no change in that as well.
Any discussion? Entertain a motion?
I move to set the stormwater fee for fiscal year 2018 at $4.25 per equivalent residential equivalent.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I can't keep up with my paper here, we're moving so quick.
We're moving so fast. The water and sewer connection fees, these are fees that are charged based on an analysis that was conducted a number of years ago for projects that might be required as new development occurs within the community. And what we've been doing is taking the previous year's fee and adding whatever the cost of living is, so we keep them current. And so that's what we've done. We've added 1% to the rates for both water and sewer connection charges.
So these are one-time charges?
Yes, they only apply to new connections into the system.
And if you're interested in what goes into these rates or how they're determined, I'd recommend you talk to Bruce tomorrow. So, any discussion? I'd entertain motions. Can we, or I guess we have to do them separately. I'd entertain a motion regarding water connection fees.
I'd move to set the water connection fees at $6.72 per gallon for residential and commercial accounts and $3.36 for affordable housing, effective July 1, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I would further move to set the sewer connection fee at $7.63 per gallon for residential and commercial accounts and $3.84 for affordable housing, effective July 1, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ambulance.
Water and sewer user rates is next.
I'm sorry.
And these rates are based on what was approved by the select board during the, when the board approved the budget in January. And these are the same rates that were shared with the board back in January when the board approved the budgets.
Perfect, thank you, very brief. I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to set water use rates at $4.70 per 1,000 gallons, effective July 1, 2017, starting with the second quarter billing due on December 30, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
I'd move to set the sewer use rate at $6.48 per 1,000 gallons, effective July 1, 2017, starting with the second quarter billing due on July 30, 2017.
December 30.
December 30, 2017.
Second, as
Any
amended.
discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
I'd move to set the base user charge rate for water at $5.43 per quarter, for sewer at $14.95 per quarter, and for commercial at $10.88 per quarter, effective July 1, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Ambulance service rates next. The chief has done his annual review of rates compared to what other ambulance services are charging. He's recommending no change in the rates other than the mileage rate, which he is proposing a $1 per mile increase in the rate from $16 to $17. But all the other rates he is recommending stay the same.
And I'm sorry, I know I ask this every year, what is it that goes into the mileage rate? I know it's not just, you know, like when I get to charge mileage for work, you know, it's a very different type of calculation.
Well, not entirely. We're dealing with a hugely expensive piece of equipment compared to a car. And so if you were to calculate the mileage based on the value of the equipment, that it's quite a bit more than the, 52 cents the federal government sets for.
It just amazes me. I get paid like 52 cents, and this is $17, you know, a mile. You go 10 miles, it's a $170 charge. It's like, you know, what's that?
It's a lot to get them out.
I was gonna say, last time I saw mileage, it was like $3.64 a mile, but.
Really?
For using your personal car, yeah. But not government, I mean, that was.
Yeah, that's the government rate, isn't a word here.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I'm living in the wrong country.
Working for the wrong people.
There's also that, but that's for a different night and over beers. Okay, so I would entertain a motion.
I'd move to, oh, I'm sorry, you do it.
No.
No, I've hogged the whole thing. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Okay, I move to adopt the following rates for ambulance service effective July 1, 2017. $625 for basic life support, $775 for advanced life support 1, $1,295 for advanced life support 2, $175 for advanced emergency medical technician intercept, $250 for paramedic intercept, and a mileage rate of $17 per mile.
Second.
Any discussions? You two quit that over there. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Annual employee wage adjustments.
We briefly talked about this before. Generally, we've given non-union the same as police as far as cost of living, but even if we weren't, the cost of living was about 1% based on the time period that we measure, which is actually, let's see if I get this right, November 2015 through November, or the end of November 2016. And the reason we picked that period, by the way, is so we would have the number when we're doing the budget for the following fiscal year.
Oh, okay, yep. I think that, I get that. So the actual rate was 0.9, but you're recommending 1% to be consistent with the union
Both
employees.
unions, actually.
What's that?
Both unions.
Both unions, thank you. Any further discussion?
So-
Entertain a motion?
I move to.
So I was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I moved too quick.
You did.
Yeah.
So my question is, for non-union employees, do they have yearly merit increases or?
Yes, we do have merit increases that's at the discretion of the manager, and that's built into the budget as well. But we don't require a motion on it because it's already determined. Or at least the budget amount is determined, not the actual amount.
Yeah, per employee, right, per individual employee.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Any further?
No, I just wanted to understand how that was, how the town employees were done.
Do you remember about what that budget amount is, the discretionary?
It's about 2% per
Okay.
employee.
Per year?
Pardon me?
Per year?
Yes. But not all employees get the full 2%. It's a range. Sometimes there's some that get more and some that less. But it's all on the recommendation of the department head. So it's not me just up there.
And your concurrence with that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. You good, Terry?
Yeah, it's just, most of the world doesn't, in terms of when you get merit increases, you typically don't get COLA. I mean, cost of living is something, if you're on a fixed income that you need to keep up. Typically, merit increases take care of in the commercial world right now. I'm not that familiar with the government world, so I know unions can demand and negotiate, so.
And, that's a piece of it here because we have unions and non-union.
Right.
And I would surmise, I have no knowledge how a town like Williston compares to, let's say, some of these for-profit industries out there, but I'm guessing our cost of living and merit would, at best, maybe start to approach what the private industries are doing, but certainly wouldn't exceed.
Well, I can say that the ranges that we have are competitive both within the municipalities that we compete with, but also businesses that have similar type positions. Because we did that survey back in December. We hired an outside consultant and looked at the various ranges of some position, not all positions, but some positions. And we particularly picked some that were we felt were benchmark positions. So we could measure other positions within the town against those. So in general, our ranges are competitive, but as an employee works for the town, generally their value to us increases up to a point. And so that's what the merit increases are intended to recognize. And I understand it's different in business, but for good or for worse, municipalities, this is the way it's done for the most part.
So this is a common practice across all, and we've done it for some.
Yes. And the other thing is, I think we can be proud of, we have a significant number of non-union employees. And traditionally, as an example, public works crew from town to town are almost always unionized. Ours are not. And you'll also see in some communities the administrative staff also unionized, like in South Burlington has that, in Williston they're not. And it's partly because we've always been very sensitive to treating them fairly and paying a competitive wage. That said, we are increasingly having difficulty hiring some of these for these positions. Some of them are union and some non-union. Police, as you know, have always been difficult. Fire, now we're having trouble, and we've never, for years and years, it was never a problem. Now public works crew, we have 2 openings. And one is the new position, but one is the position that someone had just left our employment. And we're having a very hard time filling that.
Interesting. You good?
I am good, yeah. I just wondered how that worked. And somebody had mentioned to me that I had some comments on this, so I wanted to think about this a little more. And my guess is that the private sector, in some places it's, being very good to employees, but in a lot of cases the private sector is being
It's tough.
unkind to its employees, and government may be looking like a better place to work, long term. I mean, it's.
I would hope so, but from my perspective.
Certainly maybe from a benefits perspective and security perspective versus private sector.
Well, I would say that's right. Typically, government has been more generous on the benefit side and slightly less generous on the overall wage side. I don't think that's the difference between the wages now is as great as it used to be, but the benefits, they're definitely better.
Yeah. By the way, I think everybody should be treated that way. Nobody should have to worry, right, about retiring, but it's not the way things have been going. So,
Good, thank
okay.
you. Thank you for your questions, input. I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve a cost of living adjustment for all non-union employees of 1%.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Financial management questionnaire.
This is an item that the treasurer has said is she's required to complete each year. And in the past, the chair of the select board has looked it over and signed it. And I don't believe the board has ever taken any action on it. I feel more comfortable having it on the record that the board at least acknowledges receipt of it. And you don't need to approve it, but I would like, acknowledgement of the receipt. And then I think that it's putting the chair on more comfortable ground, signing this after the select board has acknowledged receipt of it.
We'll just acknowledge that we received a financial management questionnaire.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
And, I'll be honest, I've read through the questions, and I looked at the yes, no, not applicable, and sometimes I just don't know how to necessarily, I'm gonna rely on you to, are these the appropriate checks? Are the checks in the appropriate box?
It's interesting that you bring this up. I was at a conference today and we talked about this questionnaire, and the auditor that was there actually brought the same comment up, that while it's state statute and it's recommended that the select board sign it, there's not a lot of guidance between, like, is a yes a good thing or a no, is no the right answer here. So I'm hoping to work on that project and maybe provide some more facilitation around that to the select board in future years.
Okay, great, that's a good idea, great, thank you.
Great.
Yep. So any further discussion? I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
I move to acknowledge receipt of the financial management questionnaire for fiscal year 2017.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. Moving on to the Housing Trust Fund Ordinance. Two options here. One is we can make a motion and however that comes out, or I would actually prefer never mind. I'm going to stop right there. I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
I move to adopt the Housing Trust Fund ordinance draft dated May 2nd, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Town managers report.
Well, since I still have our finance director here, I might as well take the financial report up first. Or did I catch you off guard on this one?
Yeah, we're wrapping up the end of the year. Just a couple things to highlight in this report. It does not look like we're going to be using the reserves that we had set aside in last year's budget. So that will change our fund balance going forward for next year. And we'll look at that through the budget process for next year. Right now, we don't change our current budget to take into account that we have a larger fund balance. It rolls over into 2018 is when we'll look at it again and look at that full fund balance. We do now have a number for the bridge repair, the temporary bridge repair, and that is $108,000. That was an unbudgeted expense. We're still seeing that this will be able to be covered through underspending in other departments, not necessarily the highway department.
Which, is that the culvert, the bridge? Which?
The Marshall Ave temporary bridge. While the rental from the state was not a very large amount to rent the bridge, it was the work needed to get it additional.
Okay.
And we shared that expense with South Burlington, and this is our portion.
It's half, if I remember correctly?
Yes. It is half.
Okay. And the concept of other budgets either just happen to underspending or maybe being forced to underspend, I don't want to say it. That's okay way to handle this unforeseen cost.
Yeah, and,
As opposed to just coming out of the public works budget.
Well, it is being charged there.
Okay.
Yes.
So what'll happen is, and I don't know we don't know the final numbers, but let's say everything else they're spending 100%, then they would be $108,000 over budget.
Right.
But police department, fire department, all the other departments combined, let's say, and again, I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, they were $200,000 underspent, or we're still $100,000.
In the overall budget.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one quick note on the legal issues report. There are 3 matters listed there. 2 of them have been resolved recently. So the next report, presuming we don't have any more legal matters coming, we'll just have 1, which is.
Yeah, it'd be a nice short. And anything else we need to?
Well, we're going to have a talk about one of the issues later, but not tonight.
Okay.
Oh, we're not going to do it tonight? Is that the
The gun club thing.
Oh, well, I was wondering about the memo from the brochures.
Well, that's not a legal issue. but-
Oh, okay, I just didn't know how you were going to,
Yeah, the planning office has been working on a response.
Okay, all right.
Okay. We need to get that out soon, though.
yeah. I wasn't sure where that was going to land, so.
Let's see. I guess the only other thing I have this evening is a letter I wanted to pass along. Oh, we got a thank you letter for our Public Works crew and the work they do on one road in town, Butternut Road. And this person was so happy they donated $200.
Wow.
So.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
$107,000, $800 more to go.
Yep.
Anyway, that's all I had this evening.
So I got a memo from somebody requesting consideration of a dog park again. And it's just one of those things, most towns of our size probably have one, right? Some kind of an area. South Burlington has a couple, I think.
Burlington has one, South Burlington. Most towns do not. They're a huge, huge problem.
Are they? They're a huge legal problem or
No.
liability?
Maintenance problem.
Oh, are they?
People are not as good about their dogs as they should be.
And
Many
dogs
are.
end up
Some
getting
aren't.
into fights and the people, but, you know, if the town wants one, we'll.
So that's the reason that you haven't done anything, or?
Well, there hasn't been overwhelming support for something like that. And we don't necessarily have a piece of land that's where we're gonna put it, you know, it's, there's a number of problems. And there's the expense too, because the ones I've seen are typically fenced in, so it's.
Right, you would want a fenced-in area, right? That's the problem. We don't really have a place for dogs to kind of run around without people being upset. So if you're like me and you have relatively trained dogs, you leash them, and when there's nobody around, you take the leash off and you let them run around, and, you know, when you see somebody coming, you put the leash back on, because a lot of people don't like, you know.
Yeah.
And I have 2 big golden retrievers, so, but,
Then the other issue is always the people who do not own dogs will object to us spending money on it, so.
I can see that, so you know, I would like it myself, and I did get a request, so I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
So I understand, I guess, better, but, you know, I have to say, when I've used the South Burlington, whenever I get a new dog, want to get socialized, you go to one of these dog parks. I don't remember it being, now that I think of it, there are lots of dogs in there, and I don't remember there being a problem with, you know, that sort of problem, so.
Well, we have the problem now on the bike path with people.
In the winter, I think in the winter, and then there's good Samaritans who clean it up after other people, so.
Are you talking about the refuse, or are you talking about gangs of dogs?
No,
I mean,
well,
because you can
both.
find, I mean, it can, I stopped walking in Williston Central School because there were so many people that had their dogs off lead, and my dog's voice command, but
Yeah.
not everybody else's dog is, and to have all those dogs come running up at me is quite frankly
That would be an
terrifying.
argument for a dog park.
Yeah, but,
That's even late.
I think that's improved. There was some communications a couple of years ago. It seems like quite a few people stopped doing that, because I'm out there daily, and I haven't been run after yet. Not in recent history, but 2 or 3 years ago, before, I forget what happened, something happened, where some notice went out, and there were a couple of people who had wild dogs, and you'd see a dog and there's no owner in sight, but, okay, understand.
All right.
It's late.
Yep.
Anything else?
Well, under other business, yes, I have a
Oh.
catering permit.
Thank you, that's right.
This is for an event scheduled for July 1st, and it is at the Isham Family Barn. And, let's see, of course, they have adequate parking. They've had a number of events there with no complaints. And the time period is, well, they list the time period that's not acceptable, but I'll have to communicate to them. They say it's 3 to 12, and generally we don't allow
Just,
it.
you brought it up, what would be acceptable hours?
I'd have to look at our noise ordinance.
Okay.
I think it's like 10 or something.
Okay. So can we, if we are to approve this, how would we approve it? Would we approve it with the caveat that it be consistent with the noise ordinance?
Yes, that'd be fine.
I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the permit with the caveat that it be consistent with the noise ordinance.
Second.
Any discussion? Staff's okay with it otherwise, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
That's all.
That's it.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Nice job.